background, but I think I've got rid of that now.
I hear no
Excellent.
Okay. Well, hello, welcome to us. I'm your host, Rob. Welcome to 40k Ladies' Night. That's what they do. I am joined today by some of the greatest men in all of wargaming. I'm joined by Nick. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Live from what looks to be... hello, Tom. Welcome to us, Wargamer.
Hi. Are you live?
We are, well, not just me, you as well, all of us.
Oh, yeah.
So welcome everyone to the show. I'm joined by Nick, as you can see there, from the middle of a Necron tomb world. And I'm also joined by Tom, who I think is from a place on Google Maps.
Greece.
Oh, nice.
You're on
No,
holiday.
not nice at all.
You're on
you
holiday.
If I move slightly to my left, you can see there's an upturned bed over here. There you go. That's kind of my stereotypical experience of Greece. So yeah, I thought that'd be the best picture for it.
Welcome both of you to the show. Thanks for being here. Good evening to everyone who's joined us live. Black Horizon 40k. I do need to email you back. Fuck. Andy Robinson, Wargaming Dad, Chuckle Buddy. Good evening. Who'll be joining me on the show tomorrow? That's right, Chuckle Buddy. Live on the show for the stream streak. Andy also said, hi, Nick. Hi, Tom. Oh, that's nice. He's just
the overlay behind me is cutting off most of my hair, actually.
Well, don't. That's the source of all your power. If you have joined us live, thanks. If you are listening to the podcast, thanks for doing so. And please stay hydrated. And if you are one of the people on this Wargaming Patreon who helps us support the show, then you guys are the bee's knees. That's right. You're the bee's knees. And bees are important to pollinate flowers, which helps with keeping the topsoil there and also other things, I think. Is that right?
I don't know. Are you really into bees now as well as water?
I'm into bees. I'm into...
Stay hydrated and pollinate flowers.
Flowers.
Feed the bees. Feed the bees.
You should actually feed the bees. If during a hot summer day, if you would like to put out some sugary water on a spoon for the bees, that would be great. They would love it. That's actually something you're meant to do. I don't know why.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Yeah. Bee facts. Well, join us next week for bee fact number 2. Yeah. Tom, how have you been since I last spoke to you? I don't know. To be honest, it's getting a little bit swirly. I don't know when I last spoke to you.
You last spoke to me at the weekend for that AOS event. I don't know what it was called. I just kind of turned up.
Saturday. Yes.
Yeah, that was it.
Amazing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Something
Alpha
like
Grima, thank you for subscribing. Yeah. And
where I came on and asked a bunch of questions about AOS. And that was good.
You did really well. You did really well.
Thank
You
you.
did really well. So thanks for doing so. But how have you been since then?
Pretty good. Not really done too much. I've reorganized my entire office, so I'm not actually sat where I was sat beforehand. I've moved, so I'm in the other corner now. I've got all my cabinets; they've all been cleaned out, and I'm getting them sorted. So I've been doing a little bit of hobby just to kind of get those things ready. I've also ordered a new PC, so we can actually start fixing some stuff. Because this one can't actually connect to Discord anymore without crashing. So.
Oh dear.
I mean, it's actually fine. So it seems like since the new Windows update, it has specific issues with my microphone. I've reinstalled the drivers and what have you, and done all that. It was having the same issue with Zoom, but I managed to fix that. Discord's still having some issues. But this PC is getting on a bit now, and I need to replace, so I went off and spent some money on a new PC. That's arriving in bits and bobs, but I'm still waiting on the graphics card and the tower, which is kind of important. So once that's ready, we'll be fine.
Oh my god, I'm excited about that. I'm excited about anything that gets more Tom Layton in my life. I'm not going to lie. That's true. That's true.
Kind of Kappa price there, buddy.
Is it a Mac you're getting? One of them Macs?
No, absolutely not. No. It's custom built. Like I've just ordered all the parts one day while I'm out. I'm gonna. Yeah.
Is it a football manager machine or is it a Total War machine?
I mean, let's be honest. I'm going to buy
streaming machine.
So I spent £1,600 on it, and all I'm going to do is play RuneScape and Football Manager,
which required no graphics.
Yeah,
Good
got FM minimized at the bottom right now, but it's just like because I was playing it before it went live, and I was like,
I won't lie.
Enjoying it.
Today it's been so hot in the office, that I've had to play Total War. Don't ask me why it being hot in the office and me having to play Total War are correlating, but they are.
Is that because your computer heats up as it's playing, and then the fan on the back of the machine goes to cool it down, and then cools the room down as well, right?
Nailed it. That's exactly why. That's exactly why. So Nick, he's our man. If he can't do it, probably. Well, I don't
Someone
think anyone else
probably can also.
Nick, how have you been? What's going on?
Yeah, been good. Played some Warhammer this weekend.
Oh, you did? Tell us all about it, because I would like to hear all about
Warhammer.
it, please. Yeah.
So at the weekend, I ran a one-day League of Knights online event, which was won by the glorious Colonel Cabbage.
Oh my God, the Cabbage.
The Cabbage, Colonel of the Cabbage.
I love that guy.
Took out the event. Yes, that was a pretty fun Sunday. We just had 3 rounds. We did it on on this TTS. We used Discord to sort of manage it. And what was cool on Discord is that I didn't realize this, but you can stream you can share your screen via Discord. So I could bounce around the different tables and still watch people's games and stuff like that, which is pretty fun.
That's really fun. Yeah. It's definitely hotting up the TTS world. I think I think it's been dawning on people more and more that real life gaming is going to be problematic. I think maybe for a while. Well, at least that's what I think in some places. Obviously, places like Australia are doing really well, and places like America, they don't really care about the human beings. So, there's a slidey scale of that. Which I think is exciting. But okay, well, great. That sounds like a great evening. Are you guys interested in doing some Tabletop Simulator 40k at any point, or do you still think that would take too long?
I don't know. I mean, when I first got TTS, me and James had a go at 40k, and it did take us ages, and it was quite tedious. But that might have been just because we were very new to using the program, and we chose quite a board which was quite busy, had a lot of terrain and stuff like that on. And maybe now that we're used to it, we might give it another go, because we played Bolt Action last night on it. Just a small 500-point game of Bolt Action, but it worked perfectly for Bolt Action, because Bolt Action is a little bit more streamlined as a game. There's less dice rolls, a little bit less layers of rules. We're going to play a small game, but it worked perfectly for that. So we might give it another go at some point for 40k.
All right, sweet. Liking it. Okay. Well, Tywin, in rural areas we are better, but the fuck it, hail Valhalla, let's go get a haircut is real. Oh, Tywin. Okay. But Big Goldfish says he enjoyed the League of Knights event. He said that was cracking.
Yeah, it was good fun.
Well, that's really nice. Okay, well, the subject of today's show, if you're interested, is we are going to be talking about list archetypes for 40k. For team events, because that kind of will round off the conversation that we've been having recently about the different. We've talked about how we could review units and how we could discuss units, and then last week obviously we did a bit of that for John, and now this week we're going to talk about list archetypes. I think a bit, which is exciting. But before we get onto that, in 40k news. Is us three are going to be live on Saturday, because it's going to be a all 40k reveal all day, and they've been hyping it up quite a lot. There's been a countdown and everything.
What? I've not seen the countdown. What's the countdown all about?
Oh, they've been showing like a different image with like 4 days to go, 3 days to go, like with different quotes on it every day. So it looks fairly exciting. Tom, what are your predictions? What are your feelings?
I'm used to being disappointed at this point. So we'll see what they eventually do.
So the big thing is do we think it's going to be 9th edition? I guess that's the real selling point. Is it going to be 9th edition 40k?
So I think 9th edition is coming. I don't know if they're going to announce it, because every time they probably could and should have announced it, they've so far just completely missed the mark. So, maybe they go for it, maybe they don't. I can't. I've given up predicting what they're going to reveal at this point, because they just reveal just wacky shit no one expects them to reveal, and not in a good way.
That's true. It's true. Nick, how are you feeling about it?
I hope it's being released, because it'd be really sweet to look at the new rule. Well, to speculate on the new rules, or maybe them show us some of the new rules. because a new edition's always exciting, I think, unless you're Age of Sigmar, Warhammer to Age of Sigmar players.
Yeah, that was the worst time.
But I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think it'll be that. I think it's just going to be new. It's just going to be new models.
I don't agree.
Probably those Primaris bikes.
Biggest reveal ever, bruh.
Well, I think it will be all of the new Necrons. I think that's what we're going to see. I think we're also going to see, like you said, all of the Primaris stuff, because I think that will be the starter box for 9th. I think that's going to be...
We're not just going to repackage Shadow Spear.
No, what for 9th edition?
Yeah, this is a new starter set.
Well, because it follows on actually very interestingly with the Age of Sigmar narrative. So in Age of Sigmar, obviously, what we got was the Necroquake, you had like a Chaos Incursion in Age of Sigmar, Chaos Incursion in 40k, and then you got the Indominus Crusade, and then you had a large Death storyline leading up to the Death release. So the Nighthaunt and everything else. So I think you're going to see the same parity because they are, if anything, copy-paste machines. The guy that invented copy-paste died this week, and to be honest, like, Games Workshop need to say thank you to him because that's what they do. Copy-paste one storyline into the next storyline. So I think we're going to see
add space in front of it.
yeah, space mummies. So I think we're going to see...
And in a gash of space.
Yeah, I think that's what we're going to see. We've seen Chaos... in the Ascendancy for the past 2 years, and now we're going to see Necrons and the kind of Death storyline in Ascendancy for the next couple of years. And I think that's what they'll do. They'll cycle through in this kind of evolving storyline because they've said that they are going to evolve the storyline now. So it's a nice way of, if they get the Necrons out there kicking ass, and that's really all they do. They haven't really pushed the timeline on. They've seemed to have, 2 worlds are popping up everywhere, but it hasn't really pushed it forward more. I don't know. That's my feeling. That's what I reckon's going to happen. And I'd be hype if that's the case.
Yeah.
I just want them to get a new narrative writer because have you read any of the Psychic Awakening stuff?
No.
I'll do it.
Please do.
No joke.
Please do.
Job, please.
Please do.
Be banging, innit?
It would be banging. The Primaris are pretty old at this point, so I predict it'll be bigger, better Marines called Alpha Primaris Marines. Okay, that's a bold shout, I think. That's what I expect.
Release beta Primaris Marines, and everyone will feel like they can relate to those characters.
There you go. That's true.
Yeah.
One of the things that they also released an article today. There's 2 other bits of news, and one of it was all of the threats that are posed to the end of the 40k universe. Did you see this article today on Warhammer Community?
I saw the headline.
Have a look.
Yeah,
I wasn't interested enough to read it.
It's a bit clickbaity, but basically,
it's for kids, man. It's for kids. Come on.
You think so?
Yeah, of course it is. Kids always like to speculate about that kind of stuff. This thing will beat this thing. It's my dad will beat up your dad, and it's you know what I mean. It's they just like speculating about what the biggest threat is, so they'll just read that and they'll love it. I don't think it's really serious, hardcore, lore nerds or anything like that.
No, it's a little bit just basically, what are the other factions that aren't Imperium? Tyranids, Orcs, Chaos, Necrons.
But they did say maybe they would get the Beast Arises
Wow,
2.0, and I was very excited. I was like, more Orcs all day. Beast Arises 2.0. 2.0? Yeah, Beast Arises.
What?
Have you read the Beast Arises series?
I haven't, no. What's that all about?
Anyway, so that'd be rad. But that was a cool little article. And some other news, which is sad news, unfortunately, is that Games Workshop announced that they will, good and bad news. So they'll be announced that they are in production and pre-orders will start again as of this weekend, I think, basically. So pre-orders are going to kick off, which is exciting. But they are going to adjust the prices of 400 different things on their web store. And I think adjust means raise the price.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't see it because they say, click on this link to see, the range. I mean, you click on the link and the website's down for maintenance. So I'll just have to take their word for it, I guess.
That's all the adjusting they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it just everything down to not for sale.
So I don't imagine it'll be a few pounds on each on each unit. But this is a question I have for you just off the top of my head, and I'd like the Twitch chat maybe to jump in as well. But do you feel like, compared to back in the day, I'll ignore... Obviously, it was cheaper to collect armies back in the day, but I feel like
armies are smaller.
Yeah, but I feel like armies are simpler to buy and put together nowadays. Like, it's easier to build an army. It feels like. I don't know what you guys think of that.
Physically build the models, or
no? I feel like
a functioning army together.
Put a functioning army together for not like as much money. Like, I'm not trying to advocate for their price structure as well, because also, like, I'm clearly not. But I feel like it's not super expensive, or maybe it's just the difference between Warhammer Fantasy Battle as was and 40k. I feel like 40k was always cheaper to get into because it didn't require. Nick, you played both systems. Would you agree with that, or? I think
yeah. Fantasy 40k seems cheaper to get into when it was fantasy, because you had to have big mass ranks of dudes. And it didn't seem to matter if you had like ranks of, elite chaos or elite greatsword infantry for Empire, or just militia. They were pretty much the same price. You needed the same amount of them, and that's one of the reasons I believe why they went to Age of Sigmar, to get rid of that model, that design philosophy of units. So you could have a unit of 10 and it's fine. But now I don't know. All I can remember is that tactical squads back in the day used to be £10, and now they're 30.
Yes. Okay. All right. That's fair point. I'm probably wrong. Maybe it's just because I've only been in the hobby a few years.
I think it depends on what army as well. Like, I mean, I honestly, when I started playing from years ago, I can't remember how much an army cost, because you either got it through presents or saving up bits of pocket money. Now I'm a man-child and I have my big pocket money.
And it's still pretty prohibitive.
Yeah.
All right. Never mind. I'm absolutely wrong. Maybe it's just because I've got maybe some of the 40k armies I want at the minute, and I'm not looking at a new 40k army. I guess if I was to start pricing it up, it would be like, actually, it feels like maybe in Age of Sigmar it's fairly easy. But maybe that's not true in 40k. I haven't actually. Either of you two thinking of starting a new army?
I bought a new army recently that I haven't yet started.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I got that. So I got an Apocalypse box. I got some bits off my mates, and I got a couple of other boxes of new stuff. Like it's 75% cost, and then some bits off eBay. I think so. That was about roughly 80, maybe 200 to £300, that kind of price range in total.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't sound terrible, I don't think, but maybe, I'm not sure. Probably I'm wrong. Rambo Squirrel says in the chat that he thinks that they've restructured around start collecting boxes, and then you buy a couple of those and you're almost the way there, and that isn't tons of cash, I guess. But I feel like if you were collecting a Primaris army, is that fairly cheap, a Primaris army? Probably not.
They literally just tweeted that these will come into effect on June the 1st, by the way, so get your purchases in now.
Yeah. Well, I think what they're just looking to do is make a whole bunch of people just panic buy a bunch more stuff, right?
Yeah.
Pretty simple, and clear out some stock. I wonder if it's going to go up loads of money. So apparently the Land Raider is going up a tenner. Is that correct? Thank you, the Dreadwoods, for subscribing. A tenner would be a significant increase on a Land Raider.
I mean, Land Raiders are too expensive already, just in a different, setting.
Yeah. Spend your stimulus now. Buy a Land Raider. That's correct. They should.
Don't buy a Land Raider.
Yeah, no, don't. No, don't. Not for competitive stuff in any way. So it looks like for me a Land Raider will be £60. Jesus.
It's still more price efficient than it is in the game.
Yes. I mean, just don't buy one anyway. Buy one on eBay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so you don't think the end times for 40k come in, and you think the pricing is? Do you think I mean, it's a business, right? The pricing fair.
Yeah.
It's not really a conversation to have, I guess, but maybe the cost of the pandemic means they've got to raise the prices on stuff. Let's say.
Yeah.
Maybe they could make that argument.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I totally need to get more money from you because we made more losses here.
Well,
so, yeah, okay. So
I think that's where they'll make the argument, won't they?
yeah,
Whether
of
or not
course.
that's the
It doesn't
case.
matter whether it's accurate or not. It's whether people believe it. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, all right. Well, no one cares about that conversation. Fine. That's
True.
okay. So
well, I don't necessarily care that much because I generally don't tend to buy brand new stuff. Like it's only occasionally that I'll actually buy something. Very rarely will I go into an actual Games Workshop and buy something. Every now and then I will. If I'm buying new stuff, I'll tend to go to a third party where you get discount already, like 25% off. Or I'll like eBay salvage stuff. That's one of my favorite things to do in the hobby.
eBay salvage.
eBay salvaging.
Yeah, that is good fun.
Very fun. Very fun. I think I might start to join you on the eBay salvage in the future. But there's nothing like especially the start collector boxes. They seem so simple to just pick something up, right? Like it's
but sometimes the start collecting box sets aren't necessarily I think it's more in Age of Sigmar where they're not really a start collecting army. It's just here's some models from the previous run that we haven't sold yet, but we've packaged together, where you get a good discount, but it's not necessarily the start of an army. Well, it could be if you don't really care what's in it, but it's not necessarily always a good army, if that makes sense.
There's always be some shit you don't want in there.
I think it's almost all the time not a good army. Like
so actually, if you're looking just to get models cheaply, then it's a good way. But if you're looking to start a decent army, it's not a great way to start an army necessarily.
No, I actually don't think the Start Collector boxes are particularly good in any way. I know I've bought the Start Collector Tzeentch one specifically for 40k, and it's terrible. It's terrible for 40k.
We did a whole show on this.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, we did review shows. This.
Okay. So, have you done any hobby this week, or no hobby, or should we just crack on with the show?
I've done some hobby. I assembled 40 Blue Horrors Tzeentch to go on one of my shelves.
Oh, nice. I'm currently painting Blue Horrors Tzeentch.
There you go. Nice. They're a pain in the ass to get together.
They're a pain in the ass to paint. It's literally
also, some idiot went through them all at some point in the past and raided all the circular bases out of the boxes. So now he didn't have any.
Oh, what an idiot!
He had to green stuff fill a bunch of slaughter bases to use them for horrors. What a clown! Who would do such a thing?
Black Horizon 40k. So I still send the link to that show around to new players. It's one of the best people. Maybe we should update that. That start collecting show so it's like a little bit, I don't know, nicer. Oh, Nick, what have you been painting?
Some skeletons.
Ooh, spooky.
Nice.
For a Mordheim warband. So it's the Underworld skeleton crew. But I did a Mordheim warband out of a lid of skeletons, like the Age of Sigmar skeleton kit. But I made them into like Empire themed ones. And I've just bought these extras as like heroes and stuff like that for the warband.
That's pretty great.
So I finished those this week.
Nice.
There you go.
I've only painted horrors and gaunt summoners. Although I am thinking of painting.
That must be horrible.
Nice. I am thinking of painting up the Exalted Lord of Change this week, which will be fun.
Super Chicken.
The Super Chicken.
Super Chicken's its own category.
The super
Can't have that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of painting it, but I don't think again that's very good for 40k. So 40k wise, I've been tempted to paint orc trucks, and then I looked at them again because I was looking at all the transports available to orcs, and then I immediately told myself no. I was like, stop this, you stupid fool. And I did not paint them up, which I think was a smart play. So I'm probably just going to paint up my Orc War Boss on Wartrike, I think is going to be my plan.
Yeah, do that one. Particularly Scriver gave it you, so...
Yeah, it's because it's particularly cute.
You would dishonour Scrivo if you weren't to paint it.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so on to the main subject of the show for today. Last week, or the past few weeks, we've been talking about ways to review units and also the ways to review lists and stuff. And to finish off that kind of like cycle before, I think it's actually really nice timing as well, because if the new edition is announced this weekend, then it really does give us some it puts us in a really good setting and some good framework for everything that we're going to see released over the next few months, right? We're going to be able to do some good reviewing and stuff because of that. If you guys feel the same.
If it is released?
Yeah, if it is released.
Well, yeah, particularly if they. Well, it depends if they announce it. It depends when they're going to actually release the rule set, though, doesn't it?
It does, but it's still going to be a good setup. So, Tom, this is your area of expertise. We're right. Do you want to? Oh, is it 8 o'clock?
If you give me 5 minutes, then I will. Yeah.
Do you want to wait until the music stops?
Yeah.
Okay, clap everyone for the NHS. Well done, NHS. You did it again, you rascals. You did it again. My guy, Tom, is he still playing music your side? Can't hear it.
I know, I've muted my mic.
This is my favourite time. Thursday, 8 till 8:05, watching Tom be more and more pissed off for 5 minutes. As some arsehole plays loads of music. Nick, we've got 5 minutes to fill, so tell me some things, maybe.
Oh, what can I tell you? Tell you what, nights at the weekend. What was quite interesting is, well, I don't know if it's intricate or not, but Crast is OP. Would that surprise you that Crast is OP in an all-night meta?
Wouldn't surprise me in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Do you want to tell us what Crast does again?
Well, Crast, you reroll hits against Titanics, basically, in combat. So that was pretty good. James took quite an interesting army. We just had one Castellan and then loads of Moriax Armigers.
Oh, nice.
That was pretty fun army. Fulgrima took a pretty fun list as well. 3 Tyrants with the big flamer cannons. And the big Goldfish actually came third. Even he was trying desperately to come last.
He always does. He always does. Those big knights with the flame cannons could be really fun. I wonder how much fun you could have an event with knights, like a singles event. Sorry, with knights. If you weren't trying to win, you were just taking some sweet baller models. I still think you would win a couple of games just because of how obnoxious they are, without trying to be hyper efficient, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think my experience of playing knights are always fun to push around the table. They can be good. Particularly in certain matchups, like when I took it to that GW event, I think they were really good then. But then since the Marine release, you'll run into an army that can just delete you. So you might have that game where you get taken off straight away, and then you'll have that other game where you just take someone off straight away. But I always find playing knights super fun anyway. That's why I run the League of Knights tournaments. Because knights are cool and fun.
They are very cool. Big Goldfish said I'd like to see Psycho Knights. That would be really fun.
Well, there is one Psycho Knight. For Chaos can have one Psycho Knight.
Yeah. I wonder, Black Horizon 40k says, I wonder if the Knights will get a Psychic Awakening and they'll get some sort of bonuses for running pure Knights. Maybe a Psychic Knight available for that.
That sounds awful.
It'd be cool if they got something like Harlequins, right?
What do you mean? Swapping out the traits?
If they had it so you had like big names, or if you had like swapping out for the abilities, or even gaining an ability and spending a CP gaining another ability, that would be quite funky. Sorry,
yeah, it'd be really, really interesting to see what they get.
Where I am, whenever the 8 o'clock comes every week, I don't know if you know this, but there's a guy who plays Things Will Only Get Better. I don't think you can hear it.
Yeah, you've told us about that. Yeah.
It's every week. I don't know which arsehole does it, but I won't lie. As soon as I hear it, I'm like, let's go. This is the best bit. I have some big news, 40k news. Now, before we get on the main subject, just very quickly, there's a fellow in the chat called Undead Ben. Now, Undead Ben is one of those. Like, if you open up Undead Ben's phone,
Oh my! What's he got in there?
And then you got into the secure folder. What you would find is loads of. You know how there's furry porn.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of. Yep.
Okay, so a general rule of the internet is if there is something, there's porn of it.
Yeah.
So Undead Ben's is just loads of very erotic bloodthirsters. Dozens of erotic bloodthirsters. Yeah? Because in 80 Mile and in 40k, he only runs bloodthirsters. Yeah, picture it, Tom. Picture...
I don't want to. I mean, whatever you're into, bro. Whatever you're into.
Right.
Fine.
But Underbed, with those bloodthirsters that he's been running, because he's had not tons of luck in Age of Sigmar with them, went to play 40k, and on Tabletop Simulator, I think he's undefeated 5-0 with his bloodthirster list, Nick.
What? Who has he been playing?
In ITC format. I don't
40k.
know.
No, he's been playing
in
noobs,
40k.
mate.
So, I mean, that's pretty big news, right?
Have you got that the right way round?
What?
That he's 5-0, is he not?
No,
5-0. 5-0. Do you want me to read out what he said very arrogantly in one of the chats I'm in? Okay, here we go. Just dropping this in the wrong chat for the podcasters lurking among us, says Undead Ben. I don't want to alarm the 40k meta.
You won't, don't worry. You won't.
I am alarmed. But I'm currently 6-0. So sorry, 6-0 with my 4 Bloodthirster Pure Corn Demons 40k list using Tabletop Simulator in the ITC format. The only thing I can say about that is he must be running different types of Bloodthirster, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to take.
Is he
4.
playing against himself?
Yeah.
I don't know, but
that makes sense.
Is he flipping the table every time someone starts to win?
He does the whole FIFA trick. He does the whole FIFA trick.
I just feel like we all need to investigate Bloodthirsters again. Maybe the problem is we only ever thought about taking one Bloodthirster. He's in the chat. He's in the chat right now.
That's fine.
I took multiple Bloodthirsters once.
To an event or just to a
game? Well, just to down to the club to play with them.
And how was it?
They actually do decent damage, but because it's in a shooting game, you'll run in, smash something, and then die.
Good. So
I don't believe him. I think he's lying.
Yeah, I think he's lying. Yeah, tell us what the list is. I mean, you can. I don't think you could. Who knows? Who knows? But I've seen you run the Khorne Demon Prince, Nick, but not the Bloodthirster. Maybe you just don't know anything about Bloodthirsters. Maybe we're all sleeping on a giant army that we could take. That could be the list that we take to a tournament, first tournament back, all of us, just Bloodthirsters.
No, Stomper list all the way. Stomper list all the way for that.
Stomper list is much better.
Oh, yeah, Stomper list is better. Also, Daedrin, thanks for you. Oh, Daedrin sent me some orcs. Woohoo! All right, back to the subject in hand. Tom, the music stopped. You happy, ready to rock?
Yeah, we're fine, bro. We're all good here.
Nick, do you want to introduce this section? I feel like I've spoke a lot. Or do you want me to?
You go for it, Rob.
Oh, okay. Well, so we are talking about list archetypes, or specifically, so in a team format. And Tom's going to take us through some stuff that he knows. What lists you might see. Now, some of this comes to when we're doing coverage. We might want to describe a list as being a defensive list, or a bully list, or an alpha list, for instance. And Tom is going to be part of that conversation now, because he obviously has been in many team formats. Val Heffelfinger on Tuesday, Tom, actually said that this was your area of expertise. He said,
"It's because I'm not good at anything else."
He said that if there's anyone you want explaining this to you at 2 a.m. in a hotel room in some part of the world, Tom's your man.
For Zagreb, yep.
Yeah, in Zagreb. So take it away, buddy. Tell us what you think about this subject.
So I'm trying to look at how to start with this, because when I look at what kind of lists, so I did something really weird this year for the ETC or Worlds, because I am always meant to be doing pairings for Wales for Worlds 2020, And I did something a bit weird with regards to how I wanted to set the team up, because normally the person who does the pairings doesn't really. They get involved with like building out lists for someone picks a faction and then they help them build the list. Whereas I was very much kind of a bit more hands-on with what factions I wanted to be picked.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why is because I've done quite a bit of pairings historically. So in 2016, I was on an absolutely gash four-man team. And it actually included Jay, who won Echoes of War, which is the event in Cardiff we covered back in November. And he was on that team. And what I would do was we'd all have our factions. And then I would, when the list document came in, because I was working for the county council at the time, and I would send out the list document with like an Excel spreadsheet. And I would ask the players what on average, if they were to play against this list 10 times, how many points on average do they think they'd get?
So again, just for new people, not to disrupt your flow, but could you explain what you mean by points? Because some people are also
right. No, that's fine. That's fine. That's okay.
Some people are unaware of what a team format would be and scoring.
No, it's absolutely fine. So when I'm talking about points, most team events use the ETC or Worlds pack, which is a scaling 20-0 point system. So let's say you draw exactly with your opponent over all the metrics on which you can score points in the game. You would get 10 points of your team, and your opponent would get 10 points of their team. If you were to beat your opponent by 10 points, you would get 15 points for your team, and your opponent would get 5. And so the more you beat your opponent by, the bigger margin of victory, the more points you bring home for your team. And so when I ask my players, or people I'm playing on a team with, how many points on average do you think you get from this game, I mean those points, as in average margin of victory for those matchups. And I would do it across all of the different missions. So let's say a good example is, I've got a folder down here somewhere which actually had all the pairings I did for Clash of Lions, which was an ETC-style team event, 4 players a team, run by Team England in Mansfield in 2016, early 2016. And Jay was on my team for that. It was the first event we played.
Just quick side note for anyone from another part of the world who doesn't know what Mansfield is like. It's a place. It's a place where having 5 fingers is uncommon. 6 is the norm.
Yeah.
Is that
over 2 hands? Over 2 hands, yes.
Yeah, and yet they still all use the 5-finger discount. It's a very unique place.
Yeah, it's mistakes and mistakes and mistakes. It's like, yeah, okay. So,
if you want to time travel, go to Mansfield.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in
pretty much. It's been abandoned. So I would send that out, and all my players would come back to me, and they would predict points per match. And often, the points that they get would be the same regardless of mission, but sometimes they'd be slightly tweaked. And because I was working at the county council at the time, I had fuck all to do. Literally fuck all. I was helping the fostering department next to me, like, seal letters. There was nothing for me to do. So what I did was, while I was waiting for calls so that people could complain about other departments and I could just join in, was I would do pairings. So with all that data, I set up an Excel spreadsheet whereby I actively worked out every single possible pairings eventuality that could happen. And what I mean by that is there are rules to how you pair. So let's say I have four lists. The first thing I do is I pick one of those 4 lists and I put it face down. And then my opponent does the same. So we've both got one of our lists face down. We then flip it and see what the other team has put down. And I get to pick 2 from my remaining 3 factions to put against that list. Of those 2 factions, the opponents then get to pick one of those 2 to play against, and you keep repeating that until all 8 or all 4 or all 6, depending on how many players you've got in your team, players are paired against each other, and you've got all those games. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to generate as many good matchups for your 4 players as possible. And often that does require one of your players to just take one to the chin and take a game that's pretty much unwinnable for them, or you can't get any points from, just to get better matchups for the other teammates. And that's what Jay's role was. He kept getting lobbed under the bus. Because what I did was I worked out best eventuality in every situation and said, okay, mathematically, how can I pair this perfectly? What's got the lowest floor and the highest ceiling in terms of the eventualities if I do this action? And sometimes that came down to just knowing my opponents, and it'd be like a 50-50, and I'd have to guess which one they were going to do. But most of the time it didn't, and the pairings went very, very well in that regard. But when you've got like a 4-man team or a 6-man team, specifically 4-man teams, it's very, very hard for you to you normally just say, okay, we'll just take the best 4 books in the game, and that's fine. And it's not really a case of, oh well, I need a list to do this role for me and really cause this list a problem and therefore force it somewhere where it doesn't want to be in the pairings. It's more a case of, well, hey, there's some broken armies. Let's see if we can get us the good matchups of an outplayer our opponents. It's not quite the same as 8-man.
Yes, I can completely understand what you mean.
I just didn't want to keep rambling, so I just left it.
No, I do. I think there's several things to pick up on there. Nick, you got any questions before I pile in?
I'm a little bit confused, so you go for it.
At least you're honest about it, bud. Yeah, I mean, I'm only conscious of the pairing system. I think quite a lot because I've been making a video on it this week. Yeah, the pairing system is a very exciting dynamic, it seems, because the pairing system is like it has no effect. So if you guys, like Thomas said, you put your first card in versus the team that you're playing. Now, before you do that, you're aware of the 4, 8, 6 different armies that they could have, right? So you're conscious of those.
You're aware of their lists. Yeah.
You're aware of their lists. So you have a very small window of time to attempt to work out what sort of list you want to put about against what sort of other list. And I guess the whole point of this show and what we're going to be talking about is, unlike a singles event where the draw is random, where you're just going to play whoever the fuck you play, in this you can intentionally try to orchestrate a particular draw. That's the purpose of it. However, that might not pan out the way that you want it to work, which is fine. But before you even go for that process, you have to understand what you're playing against and the strengths and weaknesses of what you have, right? That's something that I don't think we've touched on yet before we talk about maybe how you do it. AOS, so I haven't shared how I feel about the price adjustments is life's life. Let's just beat up Jeff Bezos, take all his money, and then we'll be fine. That's the future. Yeah.
How was your craft not more authoritarian? Like, seriously, I was very shocked. Force it, medic! Give it!
Because it's only authoritarian towards rich people. Don't be so rich.
All right, okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, hashtag eat the rich all day. But the... So that's what. So you have to. So Tom, what did you do prep wise to understand? Because this is where it becomes really interesting. If you're going to the event this year, then there's a very different meta. Like some of the problem lists that you might face against. A bit like when you're writing a list to go to a singles event, you think, okay, what am I going to do about 3-up armor saves on a bunch of wounds? What am I going to do about it? You have to ask yourself that question. Does my list do anything useful against it? And then, and it's the same thing, but you've got to ask yourself about a billion different armies, right?
Well, kind of. So with 4-man team events, what I preferred to do was, or what we preferred to do as a team was, what are the 4 best... Wow, you're an Eldar player, Tom. Okay, you just play Eldar. It's the best faction in the game. Oh, you're a Tau player. You go play Tau. You're a Marine player. You go play Marines. And then Jay, you just play whatever you want. It's fine. So... It was one of those where it wasn't really like a deep thinking kind of, oh, well, how do we pair into this thing? Because there isn't very much room to wiggle in 4-man events. It's normally just a case of, oh, well, we'll just take the best list and we'll just blast people because the odds that you're going to get a mirror match are much higher, right? Yep. The problem with the approach that I took was it's very reliant upon the pairings data being accurate. So let's say I send out the Excel spreadsheet to a bunch of dudes all on my team, and then they come back and they actively overestimate or underestimate a matchup specifically, right? And let's say every team has that matchup, and you've got it completely wrong. One player gets one matchup wrong, and it spills over to all the other teams. Well, now I've got a problem because I've just spent all this time doing all these calculations based on, okay, well, if I place this down, and the scenario that we end up with, the worst case scenario is that we get 50 points out of 8 here, and then suddenly there's a 20-point swing in a matchup. I've now put that down as that's the best thing to do in this situation, when actually it may still result in us losing the game because someone's got the data wrong. So it's very, very reliant on people completely understanding the matchups and how they interact, right? This is one of the things that's kind of influenced me a lot in terms of how I would like to go about pairing now, and I've done this quite a bit. where I'm now very interested in. Sorry, Nikos, you go.
Are we talking about pairings, or are we talking about what lists you choose?
Right.
What
Well, this is my point.
I think it's nice to understand the environment. I think it's nice to understand the environment before we talk about the list, right?
So I need to kind of explain why it's important to go for certain lists in order for me to explain why they're there in the first place, right? So with 4-mans, it's harder to do that. It's less about archetypes and taking a list to do a certain job. It's more about I take good list, me smash. With 8-man team events, I think there is more of that, and specifically in a case where you have worlds. So when I look at worlds, one of the things I was thinking about, because I was on my way back from another day in Manchester, and it was really foggy over the Snake Pass, and I had to really concentrate to not drive my car off a ridge. I'm going to come out of it, and then I just start thinking about like taking Blood Angels and Grey Knights. This is before Psychic Awakening in team events, because I thought that could be insane. And the reason why is because I thought they could achieve a certain role. So when you look at the world's missions, there are certain things that are incredibly static, and one of the things that's incredibly static is the terrain. So when I'm building lists or thinking about which lists I can take to worlds, I'm just assuming from my perfect standpoint that I can pick all 8 lists, and then I'll try and talk with my team and see what they'd like to play. But I would then try and fit it into like a formation that I'd like to use. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do that is because I wanted a list that could really dominate the heavy boards. So with the ETC and Worlds, there's so many factors like individual play factors and what have you that you really need to specialize your list, because you're trying to get your list to be as perfect as possible. You are trying to get the strongest list possible. Well, you can't just say, oh, well, this list is strongest list possible in a complete vacuum. It needs to be within a certain set of criteria. Okay, well, what criteria are we going to fit that within? Okay, let's say we have a singles event with incredibly light boards, and then you have another singles event with incredibly heavy boards. The lists that are optimal at those events are not the same list. You have to build completely different lists for different scenarios. So when I'm looking at how I would like to pair at Worlds and why and what's important for putting together the team comp, I need to be looking at the factors that go into the pack. So, for example, if it's a 4-man team event, the factors are going to be just to outplay people. If it's an 8-man team event, it's just going to be a case of, well, how do I create the perfect scenario for my players? Because now I have a lot more wiggle room. We have a lot more static information like missions and boards that I can work with to then produce not only a great environment for my players because they like to play on certain boards, but also a great environment for those lists, and I can gear those lists towards those boards.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, before you enter the pairing process, right, or more importantly, when we're talking about list archetypes or lists that you might take to a tournament, to you, the tournament structure obviously matters quite a lot. And will change the shape of lists that you might write. Effectively, 4-man tournaments, you think, is going to be just all on meta lists. Unless there's something done to change
pretty much.
How. Unless there's something gone. Nick, sorry.
So from my personal experience of going to a 4-man team event, because that's the only experience I have, we kind of had meta lists, but then anti-meta lists. So the first one that we went to, knights were still the big bad. So we took a knight list, and then I took a list that would kill knights, and then we just had 2 other lists that were just decent lists.
Okay, so that does make sense. I think my issue with that in 4-man team events is the odds that you're ever going to get that list into the list that it's meant to beat are incredibly slim, especially if you're in a scenario where you can't take a faction more than once. So let's say I am pairing, and I see I've got knights, and I see that you guys have these 3 lists, and then 1 list that's bad for knights. My priority then is, right, my knight list cannot touch that knight list. It can't do it, period. So what I end up doing is I put the knight list down, and then when you put 2 lists against me, you don't have 2 anti-knight lists. So I just pick the one that isn't anti-knight.
Okay, so but importantly, there's loads of tactics to.
I could just quickly finish that point, Rob, very quickly. So in Warhammer World, it makes a lot more sense to do that, and the reason why is you aren't forced into a situation where you have to take each faction at a maximum of 1 time. For example, we played one of the clubs round 1, and they had 4 knight lists, so it absolutely works in that scenario. But if in a situation where you are specifically trying to build for an enemy list, then you need to take at least 2, because otherwise you can't trap it in pairings.
It's a good tactic to bring up. But yeah, because the Warhammer World team system, and team systems are done differently all over, but uncommonly at Warhammer World, the event was you could take the same faction more than once, whereas I think that was right. I think
Yeah.
Whereas the team event in other places that isn't the case. So you could only have one Blood Angels army.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then you could out of the 4 or out of the 8. So I think that's an interesting side note, and it's a good tactic to maybe talk about when we get to archetypes. So on meta lists, off meta lists, but year in year out, I guess the real question and the point of the show, and if the answer to the question is no, we could just pack up and go home early. It's real easy. is as much as there are, like, for instance, if you were going to go to a 40k teams event, you would take an Iron Hands list, for example. Yeah, like I think that they're really good. I don't know what else you maybe take. Maybe Eldar are still just really good. Maybe you just take an Eldar list. But like, I think you would take maybe Knights, and then maybe you take Marines. Would be those things that you definitely would include at the minute, because they're very good at the minute. In singles events, they've got very good rules. The real question is when it gets to team events at a larger scale, are there list archetypes? Like, for instance, we talked on the show before, is there that blocking build? And it doesn't matter that there isn't a blocking army out there. You go and try and make that army. Does that make sense? It's like, do I turn up with like the 8-star players? I'm trying to ignore the armies in this situation of the players, or do I turn up with 8 tools and I try to apply them in the game? Depending on your answer, Tom, we can cut this show short real quick.
I mean, you could still have star players, but put them on certain tools. For example, I could have a player that's really good at defending. For example, I just give them an absolute dog shit matchup and say, right, get 5 points from me, and they go and get 8.
Right. Okay. So with a horde style blocking army, that would be a good example of something that might.
I mean, different things block on different things, though, right? For example, let's say. So one of the things that I saw a lot last year was every team would go, I put down Tau first, and the reason why they do that is because the army that's put down always gets to pick the board. And there are 2 light boards, 2 heavy boards, and 4 mediums. And the mediums are closer to heavies than they are lights. So what you do is you'd say, okay, well, I've got Tau, going to stick it down first. You've got 2 lists that are meant to annoy Tau, and you put those into Tau, and then the Tau picks a light board and tries to shoot you off, and that's the entire game. And an example of this was Plague Bearers. And I don't say that because it's the Horde. I say that because it had a huge amount of negative to hit modifiers that really caused Tau massive issues. And the Horde just amplified that and caused it a big issue. So you do have these lists. So the way I mapped it out when I set out for the Team Wales pairings for 2020 was, okay, we have one list that's meant to defend the light boards, which is basically what I just explained with Tau. You put it down, you take on 2 things, you pick one, you pick the board.
So so would you say an archetype is? Did you have a list that you, in your mind, you were always going to put down first?
Yes.
So is that feels like that's a team list role?
Yes, it is.
Whatever.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
So okay. Tau. Sorry, I just need to. Just go. It's fine.
I just need to write it down. Otherwise, because that's a really good point. So the first archetype is the thing that you will always put in first. Like
I can actually go through this specifically with you. So I can go through all the roles I have, and whether you'll either put it in first or second. You won't always put it in first, and the reason why is sometimes it might be a higher priority to take one of the heavier boards away first. For example, the reason why the Tau went down first is so that it could pick up the light board before someone else could take it away, right? Because you really need the light board for Tau. Yeah. But what if you don't need to deny a light board early? What if it's better for you to deny a heavy board early? So the way I had this mapped out was you have 8 lists. The first one is for defending light boards. The second one is for defending heavy boards. Then I'd have 4 lists, 2 of which were there specifically to take on whatever was defending the light boards, and 2 of which were there specifically to take on whatever was defending the heavy boards. And all 4 of those lists also have to be competent at taking on whatever's likely to fight you on the medium density boards. And the reason why is let's say I put, you've got Tau, okay, I put my 2 armies into Tau. Tau picks one of those armies, and one of those armies plays against the Tau on the light board. But the other army is now probably going to have to go into the medium boards, because if it's geared towards the light boards, I don't want to put it anywhere near the heavy boards. I want to put it on the medium boards because it's closer to what the light board is, right? Same with the heavy boards. And then you'd have 2 specialist medium board armies. And the medium board armies were where you had most of the issues, because a lot of the armies that are really strong in the game at the minute are medium density board specialists. They're not necessarily going to smack someone on a light board, because you don't play against light board armies most of the time, because you don't actually play on ridiculously light boards, nor do you play on ridiculously heavy boards. So if you think about things like Grey Knights are fantastic at medium boards. Fantastic at it. Okay, well, you've got that. I mean, I had a bunch of other players who were all playing armies like Death Watch and Blood Angels and things like this. And I was like, right, I know you're fantastic on the light boards, on the medium boards even, but can you try and build me a list that can work really well on these heavy boards? Because we have plenty of armies that are fantastic on the medium boards. And you can still be good on the medium boards, but I need some lists that can actually function really well on the heavy boards.
So it's a case of tailoring the boards, not tailoring.
Correct.
Sorry, tailoring the list.
The list
so, like,
for the
instance, yeah, so like if you could build a Grey Knights list, like you said, that was really good in a board that's got medium density level of terrain, but then you think, actually, I want to build a list with Grey Knights that is actually better on either light or heavy terrain. That's actually really interesting, because you're really not asking. You're not looking to play against the army that you might match up against. You're looking to play against the army that you might play. I wonder if it's a bit similar, like in ITC, where people build their list. Obviously, they're like, I don't want to give any kill points away. Or they're like, my list is always going to give kill points away, but I am going to go and just secure objectives. That's my mission.
Yeah.
So I think that is... I think that's an interesting conversation that people do at list building, but I think it's rarely done. I think maybe it's Nick. Maybe it's really done at the minute in ITC because of the Nova Elves. It's like, how can I design my bit list better, knowing the Nova Elves exist?
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely a thing people do, because you know that you can advance, depending on the deployment type, have a big block of infantry that can be safe turn 1, then move into the center, still be safe hiding, and then push out an attack and threaten the center or whatever.
I mean, this is the thing. ITC players do exactly the same thing as to what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
But they do it for one board, because there's one board type.
Yeah.
You have 2 big line of sight blockers in the middle, you have 4 line of sight blockers all in the corners, and then you have area of terrain between the ones in the corners. And that's your ITC board.
Like when we design lists for Warhammer World, we just assume there's no terrain.
No terrain at all.
No terrain at all. No magic
super
boxes.
light.
Super light, yeah.
Super light.
So I guess that's actually the same. So that's really interesting, especially as it seems like what you were saying, your intent is to be able to control which boards you go onto rather than what matches you go into? Or is that another element that gets added on top as well for the matching process?
So with the matchups, you kind of have an idea of what you're going to be playing against. So, all right, I'm going to get flamed for this, but it's okay. I put loot, and this comes into why I put looters in my list last year. Yep. Not because I think they're good, because they're utter shit. I hate them. Awful unit. But I put them in specifically for a reason. So when we went to Home Nations, and Home Nations, for those that don't know, is an 8-team practice event about 2 months before Worlds, or 3 months before Worlds. Mm-hmm. And it was meant to be going on about 2 weeks ago, actually. And when I went there in 2019, I played against Death Watch, then I played against Demons, then I played against Death Watch, then I played against Demons, and then I played against Demons. So you can see a pattern here. Yep. I'm playing against Demons and Death Watch. And against those kinds of matchups, specifically against the Demons, the looters are incredibly useful. Because what they allow you to do is they allow you to bypass a lot of the screen and push that off before you actually have to get to hit the valuable stuff. And against Death Watch, your low AP doesn't matter, but you've got enough shots to blow away an entire squad of Death Watch Marines, right? So looters, specifically into those two matchups, were incredibly good, which is why I picked them. And then when I went to VTC, I played against Nids, Eldar, Chaos, Tau, Demons. And this is my thing, because I designed a list, and I get that it was a little bit different at the time. I designed a list with a matchup in mind, right? A couple of matchups in mind. And I just didn't hit them. And that was partly down to the pairings. But if I just design a list for tables first and pairings second, okay, I could still design a list for those pairings. But if you tell me, right, Tom, you're going to be playing on these medium boards for most of the event, I might have to press you at the surface here, but the vast majority of the time, I expect to be on these kinds of boards. I can go, great. I now know how I can deal with those boards and how I can build a list around those boards. Now, what am I likely to hit? Okay, maybe I can tweak around the edges, but I know for certain that I've got a factor that I can work around. I know what I'm going to be playing on.
So when you're thinking about your list, you're prioritizing the board over the matchup because that is
something I can always control.
You can control that more than
the matchup.
Because there's so much variety. Because there's more variety in that variable than the boards.
Yeah, and specifically against 8-man teams, where there are so many lists you can be hitting. It's like, oh, well, this list is designed to beat Deathwatch and Demons. Well, we won't let it play against the Deathwatch and Demons then. I was like, oh, okay, fine. That's something I've got to deal with now. Now I've got to play my anti-Deathwatch and Demons list into Tau repeatedly, yeah. And I actually built it to deal with Tau, but, you know.
That's actually a really cool way of looking at it. That's like super awesome and really insightful. Like, insightful, but also whatever the other word is, where I'm getting a view in, as is everyone else. So I find that really fascinating. Like, so you only build a list based on the thing that you can go into board-wise, as opposed to the matchups you're going to have, because that's harder to achieve. And that's because ultimately it's hard to choose the right matchups, because, like you said, someone puts down one card, but they get to choose out of the two armies that you put in. So unless you've got two of the same thing that can counter or something, you can't really build a counter list, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be the same thing. It just has to be something that does the same job. So let's say, what if they put down an AdMech gun line with 36 breaches first? Do I have two lists that I can play into that?
Great list.
Well, okay, guys. Here are my two players that specialize in defending against light boards and going into the medium boards. What lists are going to be you're going to be playing into on those light boards? You're going to be playing into Tau, AdMech, maybe Marines. Okay? Okay, well, build me a list that's capable of defending and contesting those lists on a light board, but also something that's capable of playing well on a medium board. And so those four players are probably the biggest kind of hinge in the entire pairings process, because you've got two roles to do now. It's not just like you go build list for light board or you go build list for medium board. It is you need to be able to play on medium boards if you get rejected, but you also need to be able to play against these two or three matchups on a light board if you're required to. And so those are the crucial lists, because they need to be incredibly well designed. And it's another reason why I like to design for the boards is because obviously we talked about how you can control it, but when we turned up last year, we saw the Russian lists, and the Russian lists are always really wacky. They're really strong, but their meta is just so different that we haven't built with those lists in mind. So if you build with something that you know is going to be there, it just works so much better.
So I feel like when you're doing the pairings, you just kind of look across the table, go, oh shit, and then do the best you can in that situation.
Kind of, although you will have a month or two to prepare, because the lists are released so for example, what England always do is they always specifically practice against the German list, the Polish list, and the Russian lists, all of them, because they're the teams that they think are going to be contesting up the top at the end of the event.
Very interesting. That's honestly super fascinating. So does that mean then that you don't really, if you're talking about archetypes, you don't really design archetypes based on strategy? The strategy is the board, or is that not true as well? Are there other types of archetypes of list?
I'm not sure I understand the question there. But...
Okay.
So I think
go on, Nick.
So in my mind, so far what we've got is, in terms of archetypes, you've got a defender, light and heavy, an attacker, light and heavy. But then I think there could be another, you could have a particular style of list which is good at being the defender for a light board. Yeah. Like Tau. Like Tau was your example of defender for light boards, because you always put them down first, aiming to get the light board. And their archetype is basically, a castle that's long range shooting.
Yeah, I'm just writing something out so it's easier to understand in a second. 5 should be done in a second, because this will help you visualize it. Just chatting shit for a second, it'll be fine.
Well, I mean, that's my main skill. Don't you
go and do it. Off you go.
I'll carry on with that. No, what my point was, or what I was trying to get at, was ignoring the archetypes of like the lists, so the list that you will put into the different pairing process. What I more meant was gunline. Let's say gunline was an archetype, yeah. Are there lists like that, or like, you know, vehicle heavy lists that are created? Does that make sense, Nick? Like, that.
Okay.
Go on, Tom. Finish your
Sorry.
thought.
No, it's not a thought. I just didn't let me do it as I wanted to in the chat. So I've just listed it out. You've got a light board defender, heavy board defender, 2 light board attackers, 2 heavy board attackers. Hi, Neil. And then 2 medium board specialists.
Yes. Thanks, Neil, for subscribing. Yeah, so I understand that element. I understand that element. But then when we start talking about... So then we talk about like a list and how it works, Tom. Like, especially when we talk about the polarization of lists, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago. If people are listening to the show where we talked about how we might design lists or roles for units. So let's say you've got an army that is very much about its output. That's its point. It's all about its output. It doesn't tend to do much blocking. It's just about its output. So a gun line is something that I tend to generally think of there. It's just that role. Like, I guess what I'm asking is that's an archetype, but then it would fit into like a grander archetype, right? And I wonder if, have you ever tried to do, like you said, the Russians create weird janky stuff. Have you ever tried to go, right, we're all going to build gun line heavy lists, but they fit into these other archetypes, that they're a light attacker or a light defender. Does that make sense?
It's difficult to tell because with Russian lists you often have to practice against them quite a lot because they are very, very weird. I don't really want to comment too much on Russian pairing strategy just because I don't understand it. I've played against the Russians once in terms of as a team, and I wasn't doing the pairings. So what normally happens when you do pairings is you have one guy doing the pairings, another guy for quality control to make sure he's putting down the right card, and then everyone else just buggers off and looks at boards. So it's not something I'm like massively familiar with just because I haven't seen it in person because I wasn't doing the pairings with Played Russia.
Yeah, no, that wasn't really my question. The question, Russia was just an example.
I need you to. Can you articulate it in a different way so that I can try and understand it?
No problem, Nick. Do you think you know what I'm do you hear what you think I'm getting at, or am I not doing it well? That's the real question.
So I think you have the archetype of your list is fulfilling one of the archetypes that you've wrote down, the light board defender, etc. But then is there a further archetype to a list, like a gunline list or a horde list or whatever?
Right. Oh, I like a subcategory. Right. When I was writing or trying to help with the lists for Wales, I didn't really think about it that way because I don't want to constrict my players any more than I have to. So if I tell one of the players on my team, hey, what I'm looking for in pairings is it possible for you to build a list that does this? And when I say does this, I mean this role, as in one of the 8 that are listed in there. And they ever tell me yes or no. I don't say, is it possible for you to build me a list that does this, but also does this, this, and this? Because I don't really care if it's a horde or not, so long as it beats the matchups that we need to beat on the boards that we need to beat them on. So They can be, I guess, but it's not something you think about when you're actively building your team.
Okay, so what about switch it up? Instead of it being a horde, what about it being an anti-horde army? For example, like if I build, it doesn't matter what list, but I'm just going to pick orcs, to make it easy, When I'm designing an orc list and you're like, I want you to be the light defender or the light attacker, whatever it might be in that situation, the version of that might end up either being a horde list or be an anti-horde list. Or
it can do,
or it could be the best of both worlds, but based on conversations that I've had with you before, generally you quite like polarization. So like it's all good against infantry or it's all good against vehicles, for example.
Well, when I say it's all good against, when I like polarized lists, I don't mean that in a way that it's good against this particular thing. I mean it has an identity and it has a win condition. Everything in the list is pulling towards that win condition. Whether or not it's good at killing hordes isn't really important to me. For example, let's say I go up to my player and I say, hey, I need you to build me a list that works well on light boards, and it needs to be able to be, amongst the other things, orcs. Let's say someone takes an orc. Okay, so what does an orc list on light board?
But by orc, you mean something when you mean orcs, right? Or
yes.
Okay, excellent. There we go. I think we're getting...
I think my main point is I don't really give a shit. I don't care if it's like, oh, I need you to build a list that's anti-horde. It's like, well, I know I need someone to build a list that can beat these things. And when we say these things, we mean what kind of list do you expect to see on these kinds of boards? I mean, I get that we can, but then it comes back to what I was saying about the Russian lists. They can build lists that are really weird, and you don't build towards those lists. So what you're trying to do is, rather than trying to build a list that's specifically going to beat something on that board, you need to build a list that's capable of doing its own thing very, very well. You don't build to push someone else's win conditions away. You build to accelerate your own.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay. So it's less likely that you're looking to achieve something against your opponent, but you're more looking for a list to do its own thing very well, and then put it
absolutely.
in, and then put it into a board space. Okay, that makes sense. And to be honest, isn't really the. I don't think that was what I was expecting when we started the conversation. I thought we might end up with a bunch of stuff, but I think maybe it's really the review process. Where you would look at a list, let's say, and you'd be like, well, this is a horde list, but is that really relevant for us understanding how it wins? I guess is the truth of it. Like, when I think about the Nurgle list all the time, the blocking Nurgle list that we see from Simon Pridis, I think.
No, Simon's never played it.
Oh, so I don't know who it was. It was
your mate Scott, isn't it?
Scott plays it, yeah.
Scott, yeah. And and what he runs there, like that wins by being a blocking horde army. That it did win, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I'm trying to think. Whereas the knights definitely were, like, they were an elite. They were elite, like everything. They could do everything, right? So, but kind of. I guess you can't build a horde knight army as much as you might try with a bunch of armigers.
Yeah.
And so really you're just building a list inside of itself, right?
That'd be more an MSU list, wouldn't it? Yeah. If you were to just spam Omegas, take 18 of those. There you go. 18 units. Have it.
So Azrak says, I think Rob is trying to ask if there are any specific styles of lists you build to fit Tom's archetypes, like a light board defender, usually a gun line or not. How does it look like? There's a good way of asking it. Thank you, Azrak. Yeah. So, like, what would you, like, a light board defender, what would you want it to do? Like, defender light board, obviously.
It's the thing.
We've nailed it. We're going home. Yeah. Thanks very much, everyone.
Turn the stream off.
And this is one of the things where I have to lean on my players, because I don't want to micromanage how they feel a matchup can work out, because it'll all work out differently. It's not like I can say, oh, well, Tau is really shit against things that can deal with castles and just like run around and be dickheads. Therefore, we'll just build two lists that can run around and be dickheads. What two lists can run around and be dickheads the best, right? Is kind of, I guess, what you're getting at.
Yes. So what? Perfect. Let's maybe stop for a moment and because I think I know where maybe we're butting heads a bit on where we're trying to get at. Not that
I don't think we're butting heads. We're just trying to understand like each other's perspectives.
Because I think what you're giving is your relevant experience in managing a team, which I think is excellent. I think what I'm asking is in a authoritarian like kingship. Yeah, where you get to tell all eight people, that they're going to do X. I think that's really where we're trying to that's what we're trying to talk about, if that makes sense. Like, you're like, I want a player to just play what he wants to play, really, but I want to push him in a certain direction a bit. What I'm asking is if there's a light board as a player, let's flip it around. If I was your coach, Tom, or the parents guy, and I was like, I want you to be the light board defender, what army would you go to, or what style of list would you go to? That's what I'm really asking.
I'm trying to think about it.
Nick, what would you go to? Mate, I'd just go for just
I think a different way of framing that could be like like Tom specifically said that they had Tau as that role. Like, why are Tau good at that role? Because if it's a light board, there's very, very little line of sight blocking terrain, and they're really good at long range firepower, shooting people from a stationary position. So any army that can do that, I think, would be good as a light defender board, light defender. So, yes. Loads of orcs with mech guns spam.
Yeah, that seems like a good one.
I think you're coming at this from an angle that I don't with his stamper. I think you're coming at this from an angle that I don't really think about it coming from.
Okay,
Firstly,
well,
because
that's
I
good.
don't need to, because I just say, hey, can you build a list that can beat this? And then they go, yeah, or they go, no, and then they go and do it, or they don't, depending upon whether or not they think they can do it. I don't think about it as, oh, well, what's this list bad into? It's bad into these kinds of lists, and therefore we could build those kinds of lists, because there are multiple ways you can beat things. For example, I was talking earlier about Chris Green's experience with Tau at ETC 2019 and how he kept getting lobbed into Plague Bearers. And so Plague Bearers kept getting lobbed into it because they caused Tau issues because of the numerous access to -1s a hit that they had, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, and coupled with the amount of bodies they had, it made them incredibly durable. They get all over the board, they wrap the Tau up, and the Tau can't do shit. The Tau absolutely need to go first in that game, because if the Tau don't go first, they don't have enough time to clear out all the Plague Bearers, especially when you're considering you're getting Miasma or Pestilence up, and you're causing issues for the Tau to shoot them like that. But equally, that's not the only way to beat Tau. It's not just because, you don't just say, oh, well, because this Plague Bearer list beats Tau, and it does it in this way, we need to find another list that does exactly the same thing. As Nikos says, maybe you could go for something like Metcon spam or something like that, because that can cause Tau issues, because you can just hammer stuff, and then you just remove all the drones, and then you start hammering the Riptides, and you cause them issues that way. You're not beating Tau in the same two ways. You're beating him in two completely different ways, which is why I don't approach it from the same angle that you're coming from now. And I think I understand it now. I think I understand it. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad way to do it, but what I am saying is, if you go about it from, okay, I need to build two lists that achieve this win condition, and this specific win condition, rather than can I find two lists that can find a win condition against this, you end up with a suboptimal pairing of lists. You might get one that does it really, really well, but the second one won't be quite as adept at achieving that win condition as the first one, because you can't duplicate codexes.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that makes sense.
Does that answer the question, though?
Yeah, it does.
Is that the kind of the question you're asking?
It does. I thought there might be like a bunch down, but there might be a bunch of stuff that you're saying. That I thought we might arrive at a bunch of archetypes other than the defenders we've talked about with the boards, but I don't think we're going to. And what I don't want to do is attempt to force the conversation in a way that I think you've pointed out. I've been just fascinated by what you've got to say, to be honest, and I think it's genuinely really interesting.
Can I just add on that, what you've just said there, because that's quite important. I'm not saying that those archetypes can't exist, and I totally understand why you want to try and work out what that would entail. What I am saying is that it isn't something that's ever considered or thought about by teams, because it doesn't matter. You don't really care how something wins, you care as to how likely something is to win. And so therefore, when you come to the building of lists and you come to the pairings kind of strategy, you don't even necessarily think about that.
Yeah. No, which is why I don't think the archetypes overly matter, right? Because what you really do, because let's say just for argument's sake, Orcs is currently a horde army. Yeah, like the best way to build it is you build it as a horde style army. Let's just say that. But then the next update, it turns into I don't know, like it turns into it turns into like a gunline army. Let's just say, because like some new rules or whatever it might be. Like you wouldn't say, I still want you to build me a horde army. You would just go, the best version of Orcs currently is this gunline. That's what we'll do, and we'll try and get it into this matchup. That's okay. All right, and it doesn't matter if you end up with. So what if you ended up with 8 gunlines?
I mean, do the gunlines all work on the 8 boards?
Well, that's the point. Yeah, I think. Then
yes.
But what's good about that is you answered the question there, because you're not really bothered if it's a gun line or it's a horde army or whatever. Yeah, you're bothered about if it works on the board. Okay, that's awesome. That's really interesting. Genuinely, I'm very interested. If anyone's got any questions, feel free, because I think the whole idea of creating the archetypes then doesn't really overly matter, because what you're now suggesting is just what sort of terrain it works on, which I guess really is super interesting when you think about ITC. Just to flip it on its head a moment, when you're talking about ITC, what you're really asking yourself is this a good ITC army into that one ITC board?
Yeah, true. I mean, so you take it, is it good into this board? Yes. And is it good into this mission? Yes, because the missions are basically all the same.
Yeah, they are all the same.
There's no variable.
Where that does change. Where that does change up in that does change up in WTC, right?
Yeah, it does. They're still pretty similar in terms of these are the ways you score points, but then you have multiple missions that you're trying to build towards, and it is. I feel like the changes between missions in WTC is quite a bit greater than it is compared to ITC. But also with ITC, because you've got those two static things, you can think a bit more about, okay, well, how's it going to do into the meta list at the time? Because you are saying, okay, well, if I'm going to win this event, I'm going to need to beat the other list, but also do the same thing. Whereas in pairings, like, you might be hitting like the 6th, 7th best list in the game. You're not going to be hitting the first list every time.
Okay, yeah, I think that's I think that conversation is brilliant, but I don't think it needs to have any more added to it. I think what's really unique there is the way that you've moved past the 4-man team quite quickly, because it doesn't seem to be overly important to you, because you just take the 6 best lists or the 4 best lists that are currently out there and you just duke it out. Fucking
yeah, I think essentially you get control over. I think essentially in a 4-man team, I felt like, because I've done 2, and I felt like we had control over half the matchups, because you get to pick twice basically. So you don't have full, like, I'm not saying in 8-man team you have full control, but you probably have more control, because there's probably deeper sort of tactics in that number of players, whereas it being 4, it's over quite quickly, and you have limited control over it.
Yeah, I think one of the questions in the chat is I'm going to try and answer it. Pokey John asks, so you never build a counter gun line because pairings will never let you counter optimally, not unless you happen to have 2 of them in your deck of 8. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to, otherwise you wouldn't be able to put them both down at the same time, right? I guess is the answer. Does that become problematic if, let's say, the meta's a bit janky at the moment, Tom? Like, not that it is. But let's say it was in a single year. Let's say there was an incredibly dominant one army. Do you think teams levels that out? Do you think the process of teams means that gets leveled out?
I think it helps because, firstly, the maximum amount of points that list can get is 20 points, right?
Yeah.
So you've still got the rest of it of the list to be playing around with, but also you can just say, well, if there's this one dominant army, then I can basically force it into a matchup by taking 2 lists that are going to cause massive problems for it. If there aren't any lists that cause massive problems for it, well, someone's getting bust. Enjoy yourself.
Yes.
And what I mean by bust is someone gets rolled out under a list where they're not expected to win at all, and if they get any points, it's a bonus.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, which is a thing. Honestly, interesting. I honestly don't have any more questions unless anyone else does, because it didn't go where I expected it to go. But I'm very interested in it, and it also makes me think about because I know having spoken to the guys that run the WTC, that they are super passionate and deeply committed to making sure the boards are great, the terrain is like spot on for creating this additional element of tactical insight. But I don't think until I actually talked through this process of pairing, I quite understood, even though it's in the pack, even though it's talked about a lot, I don't think I've ever understood it like fundamentally until, like, you have to go through quite a lot of process to understand it, but then now it makes loads of sense, I think. And would be quite weird. Those Thunderfire cannons, man, they're on that heavy board all day long. Yeah? Like, I get it. Like, I get it. Well. Yeah? You can ignore line of sight. You're on a heavy board, bitch.
It's very sad that factions like Wolves and Dark Angels can't take them.
Yeah, that is sad, isn't it? They're stuck with those quad launchers.
Yeah, well, you can't take Forge World at Worlds. You can't take Forge World at Worlds.
Just a normal whirlwind, then?
Yeah, pretty much. No. Just a regular whirlwind.
So do you think that would all change if we went back to player-based terrain? So Tom, having played in the setup, because I already know your feelings, but I'm loading the question for you. Having played at the WTC where the terrain is very, very stringent and organised, would you like to see any changes made to that? Would you like to see player-based terrain, for example? Okay, why?
I don't like change, and I haven't thought about it. There you go.
I feel like there's a better answer if I beat you up on it.
Well, that's because I haven't actually thought about it. Like, I haven't even thought about the question before. But what I do like is I like the strategy around playing around boards. I really like it. I think it's great.
Yeah,
I mean, fun. Not to say that you can't do that. It's like, oh, you're playing on table 8. Table 8 has this many pieces of terrain. Off you go. Go and sort it out. It's just another thing to be doing. Like, with 8th edition already, I played a game against a guy called Sammy, who's a really, really strong player from Finland, really, really good player. And I was playing Grey Knights, and what I had was out on the table just a pile of sheets for all my psychic powers, all my incantations, all my chaplain powers, all my units, making sure they'd smote and moved and what have you, and what they all had, and I was ticking them off as we go. And then I've got my Maelstrom deck, and then I've got the sheet for ticking off which Maelstrom cards I've scored, and which Maelstrom cards I've discarded, and how many Eternal or Progressive points I've got, and any secondaries. I don't particularly fancy adding more things like I'm going to put all the terrain down to that as well, because remember, Worlds is operating on assignment. Now, you do have 4-hour rounds. 4-hour rounds are great, but a lot of that is also down to that's pairings time. So half an hour of that is normally allocated to getting the pairings done. Then you go over, you meet your opponent. You then, obviously, not everyone speaks like perfect English, so you've got to get past that as well. It is the official language of the event, and I've never had any problems with that.
Are you talking about you?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I don't either. But, like, I don't want to be smarmy about it. Like, my English is northern; it's not normal. So yeah, it's just another thing to be adding, and I would be very cautious about adding new rules and factors if I don't, if they don't have to be there.
Yeah,
I don't see what it adds.
Yeah, and also Neil, who is the head judge of the WTC in the chat, has said that he doesn't want to do that because it would mean less games would finish on time, even with a 4-hour round, which I think is
He's right. He's right.
Yeah, and then that's exactly the crux of it, says Black Horizon 40k. You either base all your strategy on the map, like in an RTS, or you base all the strategy on handling as many unknowns as possible. A good example would be the largest competitive... I don't know if it's the largest competitive game in the world, but surely it's the most successful. League of Legends happens on the same fucking map. I mean, I know...
Every game, yeah.
I know that they've added those little bits, those new bits, which I don't understand, and there's some sort of dragon change.
It's still all one map, though. Like, it's not like you can go and play in different maps. Oh, what if you had the alcoves? Ooh.
Yeah, so there's but effectively the same, and the metagame happens inside of the map. I actually think, from a narrative perspective, I hate it, and from a Nick, what do you think? How would you feel if there were 4 40k archetype boards, like set in stone? Because there already is. Like if you play in an ITC event, there's one set in stone archetype now. End of conversation. But what if there were 4?
I think for competitive 40k, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's actually
it would bring more balance to the force, whereas you can get your variety in your practice games at home or your friendly games at home. So it's not like you're going to play on those. It's not like you're playing a computer game, and you have to know how to mod the environment that you're in to get variety. So you're only constrained by those formats when you go into a competitive event, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah, that's actually super interesting, genuinely fascinating, because it would be like, I mean, at a singles event it'd be so much a luck of the draw, right? Like, which I guess is why the Nova L is such an important part of the gaming space, because it's that one map that we all play on. I think maybe it wouldn't hurt if there was a second 40k map.
Yeah, it would be nice. Yeah,
the Nova L and I don't know. Hello.
Cool. yeah. It's just
the Nova V.
I'm not sure where we go there.
I don't know what the other one would be. Oh no, there wasn't. It wasn't. It was just a no. It was more of a dead air question. It wasn't. I wasn't asking you guys to fill it. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're fine.
Honestly, that was. I've loved that. Like, I don't feel like there's any more to say unless anyone has any questions. Nick, you got any questions on that?
Well, one question I thought. I mean, Tom, you said that in one of your previous teams you had. Was it Liam or I can't remember what his name was? Who always went under the bus.
Oh, Jay.
Is that more of a player role, or did he ever design his list?
Okay,
knowing that he's going to go under the bus.
Poor Jay did not decide knowing he was going under the bus. It just kind of happened that way. So when I was talking about the county council stuff, where I mapped out what the best scenario was. In terms of I literally just did all the maths, every eventuality in pairings, which is a lot easier to do in 4-mans, by the way. There are far less variables. So I was like, okay, what if we put this person under the bus, and then we defend with these two, and they defend with this, and then we pick this side, which is the best way to go about it. So I'd like to have a flow chart for everything that happened and everything that could ever happen in pairings. And it just so happened that most of the time, it ended up with Jay going under the bus. I'm not sorry.
Banhammer that guy in the chat.
That was very fast. Very fast, Nikos. Nice work. So yeah, it just so happened that Jay went under the bus every time. And I feel like that was because Jay was a little bit more pessimistic with his predictions. And it just kept happening. So I was very appreciative of Jay. I think I got him a McDonald's once in Bristol. There's a trophy there that we won together. I believe I got him a McDonald's. It's like, yeah, thank you.
So that wasn't his like team role to go.
Oh no, we just did it. We just did
it. Is that anything that happens? Does anyone think, okay, well, I'm good at playing under the bus. I'm going to design my list knowing I'm going to go into bad matchups.
Yes, there are certain players that specifically do that. A good example I can think of is Brett Armitage, who's played for Scotland and England, and he was on the Welsh team this year to go on our team. He's very, very good at that, specifically just getting bust and getting points out of it. There are certain players that just like it because it's like, oh, well, if I got no points, I wasn't expected to get any points anyway. So that's okay.
That's actually, I have a question that's inspired me. Like, Nick, that's a great thread. So this is where I wonder about your Nick Browns and everything else. So, like, you're playing, let's say you're playing Cutting Hands, Iron Hands, or Eldar, let's say, right? Yeah. Whatever board you're going into, like when it like you've got the guy who's going to go under the bus. That's his job. He's there. That's what he's there for. But your star players, like, are they star players because they're good with the army, or are they star players because they're just great? Does that make sense? And then if they are your star players, what do you give them? Like, does that make sense? Do you give them? Do you give them the cutting edge tech that's like easy to face roll with, but the mirror is super hardcore? Like, or do you give them like the jankier left field pick that they have to play to work well with? Does that make sense?
Or are they star players because they're just very, very good with the army that they've been playing, and therefore you make sure you get that army?
Yeah, that's my point. Like, is it like? But what about when someone's really versatile and plays lots of armies? Like, do you just let them choose? What's the situation? Like, what's my advice? What's your advice?
It depends upon the player. It depends what that player wants to do. If that player wants, well, I'm the best player, I'm going to have the best army, then fine, give them the best army. Like, it doesn't behoove you to deny them. If they're confident that they can go in and get 20 points every round with the army, just let them have it. And then play with it. If there are certain other players that are like, well, these guys are all rookies. I want them to make them feel comfortable. Therefore, I'll just take whatever dog shit that I get left with, and I'll play it to the best of my ability because I'll grind out those points.
Right. Okay. So, like, in some situations,
so it depends entirely upon the player. Yeah.
I guess you want
players.
Yeah, I guess you want the 8 star players, right? Yeah, you want those 8 players who are all brilliant. But also, like, it's interesting when there's experience on the team. Do you want the guy who's got the most experience or the most adaptability to be the person who chooses last? I think that's a fascinating conversation.
And it's mostly about temperament. But one example I would point you to, if you want to look at like how star players can work together well, is you look at Team England 2019. Look at that team. It's fucking monstrous.
Okay.
That is the best team I've ever seen put together. I'm not saying it's the best team that has ever existed. It's the best team I've ever seen. It's insane. Okay. So every member of that team is just insanely good. Like, Robbo carried my ass hard at Belgium. He did really, really good. But we were still able to work together. It wasn't just like 8 egos all fighting over the Space Marine book. They were all like legitimately very, very good players. And they came together and they worked out who was playing which armies, and then they all had trust in each other just to carry out those armies to the best of their ability. And like, I was sat in a Nando's with Manny and Tom Higginbottom during Hellstorm 4 or 3 or whatever it was. I don't know. Fuck it. And we were sat in Nando's, and Nick was ringing Manny on Skype because he wanted to talk about some Gene Stealer cult ideas he had. And when you have 8 players that all just love talking about the game constantly, then you get these ideas generated. Like Tom Higginbottom, again, I was sat in an airport with him in 2018 in Munich, and he was just there writing lists on his phone with all one eye in it, because they just constantly think about the game. Whereas I'll probably finish today, I'll probably go get myself some food because I'm a hungry bastard. I'll then probably play some Football Manager, and I was like, fucking,
I understand that there's a significant difference. Neil Kerr says, and really should have invited Neil on for this to have a chat about it.
Oh, Neil's very good.
Yeah, he said with a lot of the big nations, the star players often end up being put forward as defenders because they will be able to turn the match around into a positive result.
A lot of the time it does happen, but I know there are examples on specific teams where the quote-unquote star players like to pick the army that they get to play.
Yes, I think that's interesting. Having the good players or star players or whatever we want to call them going in as the defender to try to hold the game is an interesting choice. Like those players who are adaptable, but it really probably shows the like you said, the skill level of those players who play. All right, brilliant. I don't want to flog a dead horse. I feel that's a lot. Has anyone got any? Nick, you got any final questions there? If not, I think we've smashed it personally.
My final question is: what conditioner do you use in your hair, Tom?
I know it's called Sweat and Grime.
But do you actually use shampoo?
Yeah, and conditioner.
But do you use there's two types of shampoo conditioner, right?
Do you want me to go and get you what I use?
No. It's okay. It's just there's the lady version. I'm sorry for saying that. I don't mean to be misogynistic in any way, but like there's this lady version where it's shampoo is one bottle and there's conditioner that's the other, and then there's the man version which is shampoo, conditioner, face wash, body wash,
shower gel,
and you can also use it.
I have separate things for conditioner. The conditioner makes it feel nice.
Wow. Okay, that is fancy. That is
more than one shower product.
What the hell?
La-dee-da.
I know. I use Imperial Leather soap head to toe.
Oh my. Okay. Fair enough.
That is fancy. Nick, what's your process?
Shower gel and Head and Shoulders and Agrex Earthshade.
Of course.
Just on the hair.
Just on the top. And
just
dip,
for men, all in
and
one.
always dip down below.
Yeah.
Always dip. You dip the tip. That's what I do. All right. Well, thanks for both of you. We will take a siesta today. We'll end the show there because we're going to be online for at least 4 hours on Saturday in the. I don't know what we call. I don't know what we should put up an image or a promo image. What do we call these things that we do? The ragathons.
I think the Snarkathon was all right, but we can open up suggestions and new names.
Snarkathon Saturdays. But yeah, we'll be live from midday on Saturday. Well, which is perfect. The 40k crew are dealing with the largest 40k reveal of all time, apparently. Love it if it is.
They said that for the first one.
Huh?
Didn't they say that it was the largest reveal of all time for the first reveal?
That was the second one was Was it Mega? And that was
the first one was the biggest of all time. The second one was Mega, and now we've got this one, which,
I'm excited for it. I'm excited for it. I am. Mainly because it's one of the most fun shows that we do. We just hang out, we shoot the shit. I'll do some hobby. I don't know what you guys are going to do some hobby as well. We'll hang out, and then we'll talk about the drums. Nick, you might see a resurgence of your most beloved faction. Necrons may rise from the grave. That's pretty certain, isn't it?
That's why I've started to raise my Tomb World. You can see it. You can see it in the background.
And you're pushing Tom into Greece. That's what you're doing.
That's fine. Greece is also a Tomb World.
Wow, it is actually. Oh, there's lots of things there. But it's been Saturday's 40k only though. It's going to be great though. So please do join us for Saturday. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Tom, very much for that. That was great.
Yeah, it was good fun. I enjoyed talking about it.
Thanks very much, Nick, as well for helping me ask better questions, which I struggled with.
No worries.
No worries. See you guys Saturday. Thanks for joining us live. Obviously, Retisante, Pokey John, Dude Our Day, Wargaming Dad, K-Dread. I like that K-Dread all through this was like, dear God, I'm not on board with this. He's like, I just bust myself every singles event. Yeah, which I think is best. Mouse Bat, thanks for being here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Those Wargame Patreon. If you listen to the podcast, make sure you stay hydrated, especially as it gets hotter. You're going to sweat a lot. You need to drink a lot of water. There is some evidence that drinking lots of water doesn't do anything for you. But me and everyone at r/Hydro Bros. which is my water-based Reddit that I visit all
there
the
you go.
time. We don't agree. We think drink water all day long. Like, just keep going.
Yeah, but you can drink too much water, Rob.
You can, but it's a lot.
Too much.
You have to drink a lot.
Once in my youth, for some reason, some of my friends decided to have a competition where they would see who could down the most water. And 2 of them were violently ill.
Water is dangerous, kids. Don't go near that stuff.
So don't start downing water, Moderate sips every now and then. Pace yourself.
Yeah, you can drink a litre an hour. That's fine.
Don't OD.
Don't OD.
Don't OD on water. We don't want any of that.
Yeah, but also drink lots. So, maybe just also get yourself a banana for some potassium and some nuts. The health section.
Don't ever recommend someone get some banana and nuts, man. Like, come on, not next to each other.
Just get some nuts. Find some way of getting it inside the body.
Your lips as well.
I don't know if you somehow get those nuts inside the body. I don't know how you do that.
Right, we're going. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure talking
out.
to you guys, and it's been a pleasure talking to everyone in the chat. Next time we are live on the 40K show next Thursday, might be a whole new edition we've got to talk about. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
But we'll see you guys soon.